When Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, announced that they'd be leaving the royal family to basically become private citizens living in Canada with their baby son Archie and their 2 dogs, the reaction was pretty extreme. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. And broadly, the commentary went one of 2 ways, either how very dare they, or good on them. Of those who were outraged by the idea of the royal couple calling time out on their day jobs as senior members of the royal family, so much of the vitriol was aimed at Meghan. And one of the best things during this time that I read was by journalist, author and broadcaster Dr Julia Baird. Julia wrote a newspaper column referring to another royal woman who had been vilified, Harry's mother, Diana. It was titled, "Diana's Lament Applies to Meghan, but must every strong woman in history confront such savagery?" And this column that Julia wrote struck such a chord with so many people that I wanted to invite her onto No Filter to talk about it. Jules is the perfect person to talk about this because not only has she written a book about how the media view female politicians, but she's also a royal historian. Her award-winning biography of another strong and iconic royal woman, Queen Victoria, was released a couple of years ago, and researching it meant that Julia had to spend vast amounts of time sifting through the royal archives in London. We talk about that a little bit in this interview, and it just sounds like a trip. She even had some very strained correspondence and legal dealings with the royal family themselves, who objected to her writing about some of the things that she found. To talk about Meghan, Diana, Victoria, and what happens when strong women flip the script on the royal family, here's Julia. Deluded clowns, spoilt brats, the new Kardashians, greedy, grasping hustlers, whining, ego-crazed, deluded leeches, the 2 most spoilt brats in history. Julia Baird, this is how you started your column about Meghan and Harry's announcement that they wanted to essentially leave the royal family. Where were you when you heard the news?
I was in New York, actually, and I just was so blown away by the vehemence. People were so angry. They were so angry about her. He was essentially considered to have been emasculated until he finally kind of spoke out. It was all about... it was almost like that whole pussy whipped trope, like
yes.
That she was completely this evil woman coming in and like women, as you know, women destroying things, smashing things up. So, and I honestly tweeted, okay, let's just wait to see this as soon as she'll be compared to Yoko Ono, it's going to take a moment. And it took a moment. It really was. Actually, I think that was the front page of the telly here, right?
For those who might be too young to appreciate the Yoko Ono illusion.
Yeah.
Just talk to the story of Yoko Ono and why she's become symbolic of a certain thing.
Because when she had a relationship with John Lennon, it coincided with the breaking up of the Beatles, so she was blamed for it. And he was deeply in love with her, and they did have those love-ins and all the rest of it.
The breakup of the Beatles was blamed on her in the same way as this narrative has transpired of Meghan coming between the brothers, William and Harry.
And coming in and destroying something. Now, I also think race plays into this as well. There's kind of the other, which is not quite. And without a doubt, I mean, Harry has spoken about it himself through a spokesperson about the racism directed at her from the very instance, which again, I think, destroys the way things should be and the way things should be done. And why are people so emotionally invested in this? It is, especially when you're a junior royal. I was actually watching The Crown last night, and I was watching that episode where Prince Margaret wanted herself to be something more and asked to do something more. Have you seen that?
Very much.
Right.
That idea of the spare. It's funny, there was that episode of The Crown that talked about Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister, who was the spare, essentially, or she was the second. And at the same time, there was Prince Andrew and his catastrophic interview on the BBC, and he was also another spare. And is it any wonder that Harry wanted to create a life for himself that was not that perpetual in waiting?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what are you supposed to do? And is there another? Does every royal have to have exactly the same life? And it's never really been that way throughout history. And the fact we have that expectation ever since it's been televised and the tabloids have come to they have this strange kind of dark obsession and possession. So I thought the people that were really spitting chips the furthest and the hardest were the tabloids, who were like, but you're ours, and how dare you?
Many of us didn't realise how quite literally they did think that the royal family and do think that the royal family were theirs. I was not aware of the royal rota system. Can you explain how that works?
I can't tell you the exact specifics, but I do know that there's a pool of royal reporters who are allowed to accompany the royal household and are to report on them, and they get first dibs. In a way, that's meant to control a kind of mob mentality. These are just the reporters and they're the royals. But at the same time, you can see it's also a possession thing, and this is what Meghan and Harry were talking about, the fact that they have to, release all images to them first. You can't put something up of your own kid on Instagram. You have to actually go through them. And I think there's a resentment in the fact that we give them that material so they can make money, and yet they also profit from this daily salivation and kind of obsessive scrutiny, and often very cruel and irrationally cruel scrutiny. I have complete sympathy with that decision. I really do.
It feels so old-fashioned, the idea of control being had by these, I think it's 7 media organisations that were sort of arbitrarily chosen by someone many decades ago. I don't know how long the royal rota system's been in effect. But then to complicate matters, Harry and Meghan are also suing several of the members of the royal rota.
That's right.
The organisations that are part of it.
Yes. And so there's the animosity. There's actually a commercial interest to be attacking those guys anyway and bringing them down. It's it's pretty dark.
Before we get to Queen Victoria, I wanted to talk about the last woman that flipped the royal script was Diana.
Yeah, that's right. That's what really I was thinking of the whole time, because there was this sense of, but Meghan's not playing by the rules, but she's not doing things the way, this stuffy decorum, which must be so oppressive when you're inside it, to even show any humanity. And the way she's so powerfully and effectively and enduringly skewered this mythology of what the family was supposed to be.
Do you mean Diana or Meghan?
Diana.
Yeah. By she's talking about the grey men and alluding to the affairs.
Yep, the firm, the establishment, their dislike of her. They hadn't decided that she was not an acceptable princess to them, not going to be an acceptable queen, that she was going to be the queen of people's hearts. And, the falling down the stairs, the eating disorders. She really told us that the life of a princess was absolute hell sometimes, especially when your husband was no longer in love with you and loved another woman and was kind of openly cheating on you. And the way it's one of those iconic interviews and images of her looking up through her lashes, and she had everyone gripped, and she said in that interview, with the BBC then, I don't play by the rules. And there was a defiance, there was a real quiet but steely defiance about even the decision to do that interview and go against her advisors and not tell anybody that it was happening. And leak things. Yeah, she had her own power. She had an immense power and she wielded it, yeah.
We were young journalists when that happened. I remember where I was and the day that Panorama interview happened, and I remember it was early in the morning in Australia and I was late to work because I just couldn't get off the couch watching it. And it was before social media, so people couldn't really congregate. I worked in a monthly magazine then. I think you worked at a newspaper, so at least you were a little bit more part of the news cycle that could respond to that.
Just before, I think I was finishing my PhD then, but yes.
Yeah, so I'm trying to cast my mind back to how that interview was viewed more widely. Right. I know that I viewed it with extreme sympathy and shock and admiration.
But don't you think that's because we were young women going, hell yeah?
Yes.
I can imagine being that. And how awful. We'd seen her, this tremulous bride, we'd seen this shy woman who actually said, I really loved him. And then I found these cufflinks, and then I knew that Camilla was still there, and then she had eating disorders. And, she made it relevant.
She did. No one had spoken about having an eating disorder before. It's so funny thinking back now when people literally live tweet their pap smears. But back then, saying I had bulimia was absolutely unheard of. So in many ways, she was the first celebrity to give us the gift of recognising things about herself. I mean, I'd had bulimia when I was a teenager, so I was like, Oh, my goodness.
Right. And you kind of would get it. And
Yeah.
there's Harry, who's grown up, the sad boy at his mother's funeral, this kid who then has seen his mother's sex life, physical attributes, dodgy relationship with his father dissected on and on and on, and who, of course, in some ways must blame the press for her death and the paparazzi chase and so on, and has said, I don't want this to happen to my own family, marries a woman who within such a short period of time is getting roasted for eating avocado on toast and saying avocado is, like she's responsible for human rights abuses, whereas Kate Middleton is praised for precisely the same thing and precisely the same behaviour. And I kept thinking about Hilary Mantel. Remember that speech she gave about how Kate Middleton was the perfect princess? That's right. Was it like, I can't remember the word she used. It was like this spindly, thin, kind of almost manufactured creature. And people really jumped on Hilary Mantel for it, saying she was insulting the princess. But it's true. We don't know what Kate Middleton thinks about a lot of things, but we know that she acts that role perfectly.
It's funny. You look at her, and I always look at her and Princess Mary side by side, and they both seemed, before they married princes, to be such rambunctious young women. They seemed to both be such they liked to drink. They were quite sporty. They were quite out there. And then both of them, when they got married, became impossibly thin and silent.
Right.
And is that what we think a good princess should be?
Right.
Is that what we as society, or is that just what the media think?
Right. And imagine if we had a princess who started airing political views. I mean, not talking about her own physical, and emotional issues, but just started saying, even for them to talk about climate change, even to say, as a couple, Harry and Meghan, we're concerned about this and we really want to add any weight we might have to those campaigns. They just hop on use Elton John's private plane to get somewhere, and they're completely roasted. So it's very hard. And if Meghan Markle said anything political.
Well, she did a little bit when she did that British Vogue guest editorship and put those women,
That's true.
some incredible feminists on the cover. I mean, that's as outspoken as she could be, right? Trying to talk through other people.
Right. I just meant in terms of like criticising a leader or that kind of thing. Yeah. Which wouldn't be very smart anyway, I suppose.
In your piece, you quoted one of the many insults that Piers Morgan has hurled at Meghan, and he is really quite obsessive.
It's weird, isn't it? And he's like, I wonder why she doesn't want to be my friend anymore.
Piers Morgan, who is like an English former tabloid newspaper journalist turned, America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent judge turned, I think, breakfast TV host. He's like a really right-wing grumpy Koshi. And he has made a really great career of trying to insert himself into the narratives of young, beautiful women, which is interesting. But you noted one of the things he said very sneeringly about Meghan after this decision was announced: what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. And you commented, what sort of an insult is that?
Right.
This idea that a strong woman is somehow the worst thing you could be and give the biggest affront to the British people.
Right, and effectively strong. Imagine what Piers wants, he never gets. Would be, incredibly emasculating. Sorry. No, you're right. I'm a person who wants to walk around in my public and private life and never get a thing that I want. Why is that level of submission? And really, I think he was reflecting his own kind of anxieties or whatever about the way women should behave onto her.
Before you wrote Victoria, your biography of the Queen, one of your other books was Media Tarts. I read that before I knew you, before we became friends. And it was about how female politicians are portrayed by the media.
Yep.
What made you want to write that book, and how much do you see it parallel today with just any woman in the public eye?
Totally. That's funny. I haven't spoken about Media Tarts for a while, but in a way I speak about it all the time because especially when Julia Gillard was in power, and it happens all the time to women in the public eye. Sarah Hanson-Young and her slut-shaming stuff. It just goes on and on and on. Do you know what? I came at it through... I've always been interested in the fact that I think we have innate cultural difficulty with imagining women exercising power or authority. And I first looked at that in this honours thesis in the church. Like, what was this incredible effort put to stop women speaking about God. Like, why not? Like, why? Don't get it, right? But hundreds of thousands of dollars in court cases and like piles upon piles of reports, and so that kind of really interested me. And then I guess I just applied that in the public realm. And I think in the 90s we saw a lot of women raised up and then trashed. And you know, we had Cheryl Kernow. Pauline Hanson was a completely different category, but there were some similarities there, I think. Natasha Stott Despoja. Did I say Cheryl Kernow? Because I keep thinking about Cheryl and Bronwyn Bishop because...
Carmen Lawrence, Joan Kerner.
Carmen Lawrence and Joan Kerner, but also if Barnaby wanting to be leader again, the redemption that's offered to men is very rarely offered to women in the same way. Once that story came out about her, she was just a national...
Cheryl Kernow, you mean?
Yeah.
So Cheryl Kernow was leader of the Democrats, which was kind of like a third party that doesn't exist anymore. The Greens has sort of come up to take its place, but it wasn't as left-wing as the Greens. It was sort of a...
It was a balance of power. They really were very influential, nutted out, started by John Chipp with the, we're going to keep the bastards honest.
And she spectacularly moved to the ALP.
Yep.
And after that happened, and it didn't go well for her, it came out, a political journalist called Laurie Oakes, who's now retired, broke the story that she had actually been having an affair with Gareth Evans, who was in...
the cabinet, the Labor cabinet. And they said that's why she came across. And he said the reason he had to break that, whereas it hadn't been broken for other men having affairs, was that she wrote a memoir and she didn't include it. And that it would have been key to her making that decision of moving across. Now, we do not know that.
No.
I mean, you'd have to do a vast map of all the male political leaders and the times they were having an affairs and the political decisions they made to see if they were being influenced by whichever lover or encounter or whatever they had at the time. It was so pregnant with assumption. And we have to remember she was polling as the most popular politician, the most desired PM when she first moved across. It was a huge coup, although it was also a hobbling of the Democrats, which was another desired aim. But then she effectively really got hounded out of the country. And I just remember when I interviewed her at that time, and she spoke to me about a book called The Floating Brothel, which was about this group of women brought over as convicts who'd were made to work as sex workers. And it was a line in there saying that when their character is stained, they can always return, but a woman is kind of outcast permanently. And I just thought of that again this morning when I thought of Barnaby Joyce. Which is not to say, anyway, there's differences in that situation, but...
Well, I want to ask you about, when you talk about that massive wave of popularity, Cheryl Kernow was massively popular before her downfall. Julia Gillard, people forget, was massively popular before she became the object of derision. Hillary Clinton, Meghan Markle, they were all massively popular. What is it that changes from people loving them to people turning against them?
Isn't Hillary Clinton's line is that people always like me when I'm applying for a job when I don't actually have the job? That's part of it. That's what, that's the same for Julia Gillard, Meghan Markle, occupying positions of power. There's something that we see as fundamentally incongruous. And then once women are there, there's a sense that they're grasping at it for evil ends. So all this is about Meghan. Okay, she fell in love with Harry, but she always wanted that, and she's fame hungry. I mean, she was a really well-known actress, Suits is actually great.
And also, which is it? Did she really want the fame and want to be a princess and wanted to trap a prince, but now she's leaving and so...
doesn't really want it.
Yeah.
But so she wanted that so she could use the crest. I don't know. It's weird, right? But it's always a sense of a sinister motive. It's incongruity. Women and power, women and authority. And so, even when I was looking back, I called them the Steel Sheilas in my book because when we look back at women who were just had to basically, again, I went back through all the files of politicians just in every state parliament in the country, right back from the beginning of when we had female MPs, just to look at the major themes that emerged. So when they would have to sack people or cut money from departments, they were kind of there was a much more sinister overtone. The iron fist and the velvet glove. It wasn't a question of efficiencies. It was something really a bit chilling and ruthless. But there were other tropes as well. There's the sex bomb, the fascination with what women are like sexually, and so on.
one of the most powerful women in history is Queen Victoria, who you famously, I was going to say eulogised, biographized. I don't even think that's a word.
Yeah.
Whose award-winning biography you wrote over many years. And the reason I was so interested to talk to you was that, you know, these two facets of your career in terms of looking at the way media treat women in power and also being a royal historian have sort of coalesced and coagulated in this moment of Meghan and her behaving in a way that flipped the script. But the original flipper of the script really was Queen Victoria, wasn't she?
In many ways. I mean, I do keep thinking of it. I mean, on one level, apart from her as a woman, the amount of effort that the royal family put into, as you know, in trying to stop me printing things that I found in her doctor's archives in Scotland about her relationship with her gilly, John Brown, and whether or not that was sexual, the effort they put in to try to maintain the respectability of Queen Victoria at the same time that Andrew's out there like on Pedophile Island, having come via pedophile jet with Jeffrey Epstein. It's like the priorities are really kind of weird right now.
How did they try and stop you? What did you find and how did that actually play out?
I found that what I really wanted to find was what she was buried with. I'd heard that she'd written some instructions on her burial, what was to happen, and they were to be kept in the pocket of her dresser at all times. And the moment she died, it was to be given straight to her doctor, not to any of her children, not to anyone in the family. And then there's actually two versions of them. She wrote that a few years apart, and I found them in her doctor's descendants in the archives, which are absolutely meticulous.
You found the actual note that she wrote in 1901?
Well, she died in 1901. This is a few years before that. She was prepared, and she wanted to be. It was a little bit Egyptian, like she wanted a lot of things in her coffin. There were a lot of a shawl to be knitted and a plaster cast of something else and jewellery people had given her. But in her right hand, she wanted a photo of Albert and a lock of his hair.
Her former husband, her deceased husband, yes.
Yep, died when they were 42. And then in her left hand, she wanted a photo of John Brown and a lock of his hair. And on that hand, to be also placed his mother's wedding ring, which John Brown had given to her before he died.
So he'd become her. Was she allowed to? She would have been allowed to marry again, wouldn't she? After Albert had died, halfway through her life.
I think that would have been. That probably would have been frowned upon,
even though she'd been widowed.
Church of England. Think about divorce. It would have been very frowned upon.
But divorce is different to being widowed, isn't it? With all my knowledge of the Church of England. Come on, Jules.
I think that would have been scandalous, but it was a scandal at the time that she was called Mrs. Brown.
That was her nickname.
Mainly in Europe, because she was seen, she went everywhere with him and he was completely handsome. She was under 5 foot. She was like 4'10" or 11 and he was 6 foot something. And he would pick her up and carry her around the moors. Like in her diaries, he's a very physical presence. He lifted me onto the horse and over a puddle and helped me up this,
what was his actual role, his official role?
It's like meant to be a Highlander gilly. So someone that helps with the estate and more like help you go on expeditions. And so it's not like a servant, but it is someone who does serve.
A little bit like in The Crown, that guy who helps the Queen look after her horses.
Yep.
And there's a few moments alluded to in that where you think, is there something more to this?
Right.
Or could there be something more to this?
Right. And he called her woman. Her family called him the Queen's Stallion. She talks about how he made her laugh because he picked her up and was like, babe, you put on weight. I mean, I didn't say babe, but whatever. And she thought that was really funny.
Whatever you say in the 1800s. Because I'm sure not many people could talk to her in that way.
In fact, her lament when Albert died was, "Who will call me Victoria now?" And she really fell in love with someone who called her woman and made her laugh. And he drank too much and she just turned a blind eye to it. There was an account once of another servant who was recorded as being drinking and derelict in his duties, and she just wrote down along the side of the note that was sent to her, poor man. So there were some things that she tolerated. But she also, her son was blackmailed. Someone who managed the estate, the son of the manager of the estate, the prophet as it's called, EIT, there was a bundle of 200 letters. And his son got them and came to them. And again, this doctor whose house I went to, who had survived Victoria, was charged with going to get these letters, paying a handsome sum for them. They were destroyed, and all he put in his little notebook was that they were very compromising. But I got these warning letters from the archives. We don't want you to print that material, and it's because a legal threat. I had to ask Jeffrey Robertson to have a look at it for me.
So who are these the grey men?
Oh, yeah, it's
who is the? For those of us who don't understand, Diana talked about the grey men. When Meghan and Harry were talking about leaving, there was all this stuff about he tried to see his grandmother, but the grey men said that he couldn't and they got in the way. And, they all had their representatives at the meeting working out. Who are these people? What is this layer of kind of bureaucracy?
I don't know. It's the managers of the royal household. I mean, it took me years to get into the archives. I mean, I think I've told you this story, but it's, it was 3.5 years before they would let me in, and they said no to me 3 times. And it was like, this is your first biography, which was true. You've never written royal history before, also true. You've never written about Victoria before. And I was like, but I have a PhD in history. I've got a contract with Random House in the US. I will promise you I'll treat this in a scholarly fashion. And I tell you, they don't have to be transparent about who they let in and who they don't. I mean, and very soon after my book came out, I met someone from the Women's Weekly here who was like, oh, I loved going to the archives for my book. And I was like, damn it. Like they just, for some reason, they decided they didn't want me to come in.
Because they didn't want, they know that if they let someone in from a magazine, they'll write something short and sharp. But, your book is hundreds and hundreds of well-researched pages that tell a very detailed story.
But it's a big deal getting into the archive. It's, the round tower at Windsor Castle. You've got to climb. It's actually 99 steps to get up to it, and you sit there and you've got kind of gloves and you're just holding her actual letters and documents, and it's so fantastic. And I found some really great stuff in there. But, yeah.
Why were they so invested? It's not like I was about to say, it's not like she was hanging out with child molesters like some other members of the royal family. Like, basically, she had possibly a relationship with someone after her husband died, after they had a long and loving marriage. Nothing scandalous there.
No. I mean, look, someone who, is it Kitty Kelly? Someone who writes kind of biographies did say in one of her footnotes that the Queen has a vested interest, herself feels particularly attached to Victoria. And there's just been, look, the archives are so, if you could really get in there with a torch one night and see what was there. I mean, Louise, her daughter Louise's box, there's a box there, but it's just not accessible. You cannot get to it.
Why not?
Oh, she herself was. I mean, she had
9 children, Victoria, right?
Yeah.
And she didn't like kids much.
She
didn't like being pregnant.
She didn't like being pregnant.
Didn't like babies.
She thought breastfeeding was like too animalistic. When her daughter Alice started breastfeeding, Victoria called one of the heifers in the Windsor Dairy Alice.
Really?
Anyway,
that's not no,
it's actually
like an actual heifer, an actual milking cow,
an actual cow. So yeah, she did dislike that, but she loved them when they'd grown a little. She just wasn't great with newborns, which is actually pretty common.
Yeah,
like that whole Morrow reflex used to freak her out. She called them frog-like.
When they startle, the startle reflex.
Yeah, they do look like little frogs.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, but she was very attached to her children and very attached to her husband. But yeah, so Louise, who was, I think, with her much older sculptor lover when he died, possibly in the act. Again, there's just scandals and we just don't know about them. So it's a great mystery, and it's also a great frustration if you're writing biographies of the royals, knowing that there's layer upon layer. So when you get a fragment or a few fragments like I did in Scotland, you just jump on it.
Pull that thread.
When you're there, they follow you to the bathroom to make sure that you don't, take off with any documents and kind of stuff them down your
underpants.
Any knickers. And
were you tempted?
Which gets awkward. It gets really awkward because I just stopped drinking tea when I was there, and because like there would be a microphone kind of much like this one, and there's like 2 of you in the room, and if she was busy and you're like, I'm sorry, I have to use the facility, she would press this button and there would be like this speaker around the round tower. It'd be like, Dr Baird would like to use the bathroom.
Are you serious?
Again. Could someone please come and assist her?
You're like, I've got a UTI, okay?
No, I just stopped. You just have to go in and just like not move until 4 o'clock. Although they wheel in tea and stuff at one
need
point.
a
A little
catheter.
biscuit. Yeah, that's right.
You wrote in your column about how this idea of wanting to take time out from royal life and royal duties that everyone's getting in such a flap about with Harry and Meghan, who are not even the heirs or anywhere near the heir part of the whole business.
Yeah.
Victoria did that after the death of her husband.
Yep.
What did she do? She was so devastated.
I'm going to Scotland. Then
She
John
spends-
Brown was around. Oh, no,
Duff you. I'm out of here.
Yeah, you're going to open Parliament? No. Year after year. So they just put her, like they draped her robes on the back of the chair. And you should see her letters to her ministers. She's like, how very dare you? Don't you know how much I have to do and the labouring and that? Because she did work, but she just didn't want to go out and do the public stuff. I actually started to think she has developed some kind of agoraphobia, like not wanting eyes upon her.
Well, reading your book, how many times did people try to assassinate her or attack her in public? A dozen or something.
8 times.
Gee, I wonder why she didn't want to go out in public.
Most of the would-be assassins, ended up in Australia, by the way. That was their place. We've got their descendants all around the country if you want to know if that explains anything. But no, and some of the women poets at the time were like, what is this feverish thing about wanting to kill the Queen? It didn't happen to the King.
It's true, we're laughing, but it's not very funny.
No, it really did. It did become really clear to me during it when I was looking at that. And we're also having a national debate about domestic violence. Like, wow, there were people who, and of those men who were interrogated, some were mad and some professed to be deeply in love with her. Some just didn't want a woman to be queen. And there was one guy who actually got through her coach and smashed her in the head. And she still went to the opera that night with a big black eye. She had this thing about, I'm still going to appear in public. I'm still going to go out in my open carriages, kind of screw you. Partly because she also got a high from the love she got after it.
That's right. You wrote about how she said sometimes it's actually worth being shot at just because that would make her popularity rise because everyone would feel very sorry for her.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you think's going to happen next? Do you think everything's died down and the deed is done? What do you think Harry and Meghan's life looks like in this new phase?
I think it's going to be pretty precarious for them in some senses. I don't know how they're going to get... because it was almost instant that, okay, they're not part of us anymore. And instead of saying, look, they've made good on what they said they would do, yes, they will give up this, this and this, even though clearly they didn't want to, all of that. They're going to pay for the renovations at Frogmore and so on.
Why do you think they kept the titles? That seemed to me a bit weird. It's like...
Maybe it's him not wanting to let go of the whole family thing. I don't know.
It did feel a little bit half pregnant. Like, we want to leave, but we still want to be called the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Like, do you though?
Yeah, but I think but is there any other way to still be the Duke of Sussex?
Harry and, why do you need to be the Duke and why can't they be Harry and Meghan? That will not make them one iota less valuable or famous or respected.
There would have been someone tooting a bagpipe every time this guy opened a window. You know what I mean? Like, he's so steeped in tradition and history, and maybe you just wanted to keep some part of it. I don't know. Maybe it's wanting to have your cake and eat it too. But yeah, maybe, I don't know. It's just a family connection. But it was funny the way people were calling for absolutely being stripped, or you're fully in or you're fully out, and there's no middle way. It seemed like that was not really allowed. But very quickly it was like, they've still said their Royal Highnesses on something minutes after announcing they were gone. It was like, it's minutes. Give them a little bit of a break. And, yeah, whatever work they're going to do, I think the scrutiny will still continue, right? You can only hope that over time it might die down. And she's very firmly established as a conniving kind of creature who split the boys apart and has split the family apart. And actually, even though I very firmly think that they should be allowed to carve out whatever life they want, this kid who lost his mother and has been, yes, incredibly privileged, but also very trapped for a long period. You have to have some kind of empathy for that. Even though I feel that firmly, I think that it's really hard to not dislike her when you read this coverage. I keep picking up something going, oh, yeah, I suppose she is a bit dark on that front. It just kind of gets a bit grimy. It rubs off on you.
Do you think that it's true that she came between the brothers?
Did she? Well, yeah, they obviously fought, but it's not is it her fault? I don't know. He fell in love with someone. He's, what do we know that Harry said? We've gone our separate paths now.
I found it so interesting how invested people were in the relationship between the two brothers, and that can only be a hangover and a legacy for those of us who remember Diana, because what two adult men put their siblings above their spouse and children? Like, that would be weird and not normal and probably not healthy.
Right. And it's all just happening. We're seeing it just unfold in real time now. You'd hope that, as time goes on, they'd mend that. I don't know. I just think a tabloid royal life is just a completely unenviable one.
Knowing what you do about how that family works and how that machine works, the level of sort of gobsmacking transparency with which it all happened. I mean, the Queen was talking about money in statements and, things that were absolutely unheard of. Do you think that in some ways this has dragged them all forward a little bit into the, if not the future, maybe the present?
No, because I think we saw them, we saw like this couple was supposed to be a sign of modernity. I mean, look at who was like their wedding and who was like the fantastic preacher at their wedding, and there was kind of life and energy, and it wasn't just the same old respectability and rhythms. I think it's always going to be a tension for William and Kate as well, what it means to try to be modern. But one of the things that they expressed their modernity through was talking about mental health. And now it's clear that both Harry and Meghan's mental health has been suffering over the past kind of couple of years. So how do we tolerate that? What's the point of them talking about it without us then allowing them a little bit of slack after it? Do you think it's going to make them more modern, the royal family?
I think that those agents of change are no longer in the tent.
Exactly.
And I don't see Kate fighting the fight from inside the firm, and I don't see William doing that. Charles may be a little bit in his own way, wanting to slim down the what's it called, the royal list or whatever it's called, and wanting to modernise a bit, but he's only got a few minutes on the throne, a few years, and then it's William. And I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a revolutionary type so much either.
No.
Not like his brother. And I just think you're born different. Like if you're born knowing that job's going to be yours one day, you're almost bonsai. Like your growth is almost stunted by that expectation that you're born with, in the way that Andrew didn't have that and Anne didn't have that and Harry didn't have that.
No, exactly. And there's a relentlessness. It's inherited power. And it doesn't always work out well for the inheritors. I mean, Victoria, I think if she'd had the option to carve out things differently, we spoke about, how she went to Scotland and she refused a lot of public duties, and, there were people hanging up signs on Buckingham Palace saying, position vacant inside. Republican sentiment really rose up during those times. She underestimated, as her son knew very well, the importance of spectacle, and she loved it when she eventually came out for her Jubilee, when she couldn't even get out of her carriage. She had to actually sit outside the cathedral in this thing because she could barely walk by that point. She did carve out some different ways of being, but it's steeped in history. So what is actually going to be possible?
We shall see. Julia will be coming back to talk to me about her new book, which is a memoir. It's called Phosphorescence. She'll be back in a few weeks' time, and I'm reading it at the moment in preparation. And wow, I cannot wait for that conversation. And if you want to read more about Queen Victoria, Julia's stunning biography of the iconic Queen is available from Booktopia or any good bookstore. Also, we have a new podcast. It's called Get Me Pregnant, and it won't physically get you pregnant just by listening to it, because that would be weird, but it is your no BS guide to assisted fertility. It's hosted by Rachel Corbett and Lee Campbell, and every week they're joined by fertility specialists. So if you or someone that you know is trying for a baby and it's taking a bit of time, or maybe you're thinking about going it alone or using a donor or a surrogate or freezing your eggs for the future, this podcast covers everything you need to know. Episode 1 is out now, and it breaks down how to get your body and mind in the best possible position to try for a baby. Not sex position, that's a different thing. Although maybe it covers that as well. You can find it at mamamia/podcasts/getmepregnant, or in your favourite podcast app now, or you can follow the link in our show notes. No Filter is produced by Bridget Northeast, and I'll see you on Mamma Mia.